Is it possible to imagine that the real power in gilded mansions belonged not to those who wore diamonds, but to those who carried the keys? In an era when outward glamour concealed deep personal tragedies, it was these women who held the invisible reins of control over vast estates. They did not own these houses, but they knew every creak, every secret, and every hidden door better than the owners themselves. Their lives were devoted to serving the wealth of others, while their own destinies dissolved in cold corridors and endless duties. They were housekeepers, chief stewards, whose straight backs and stern gazes became symbols of order, but whose hearts often remained locked away. They were respected, they were feared, the comfort of entire dynasties depended on them, but this status came at the price of loneliness and the renunciation of their own happiness. Watch the video to the end to find out how these women sacrificed their youth and freedom to become perfect mechanisms in someone else's luxurious life. What if I told you that everything you believed about servants was untrue? We are used to seeing only silent shadows serving tea in historical films, but the reality was completely different. The housekeeper in a large Victorian house was not just a servant, but the CEO of a huge and complex enterprise. A heavy bunch of keys always hung from her belt, the jingle of which made the hearts of junior maids and footmen freeze. These keys were a symbol of absolute power over the pantries, wine cellars, silver cabinets, and linen rooms. She alone had access to the most valuable supplies in the house, and this trust from the owners elevated her above all the other staff. However, this symbol of power was also a symbol of her endless lack of freedom. Each key on this ring meant responsibility from which it was impossible to escape, day or night. She couldn't just close the door and forget about work because the house lived around the clock, breathed and demanded constant attention. This bunch of keys physically pulled at her belt, reminding her that she was chained to this place by invisible chains of duty. Her day began long before the masters woke up and ended when the house fell silent. She checked food supplies, planned elaborate menus, and kept an eye on the expensive porcelain and crystal. Every crack in a cup or stain on a tablecloth was her personal failure, which could not be allowed. She kept ledgers, accounting for every penny spent on the household, and reported to her master with the precision of a bank clerk. Her status as a housekeeper required her to have an impeccable appearance, which in itself was a uniform of authority. She wore only black silk dresses, always perfectly ironed and buttoned up. Her hair was smoothly combed. Not a single curl dared to stray from her strict hairstyle. This strict appearance created the distance necessary to manage the people with whom she lived under the same roof. But behind this outer armor often hid an ordinary woman, tired of endless control. She had no right to make mistakes, show weakness, or display emotions in front of her subordinates. Her authority was based on iron discipline and the ability to remain ice-cold calm in any situation. Even if she had a headache or felt uneasy, she would approach the staff with an impenetrable expression. This professional deformation was a defense mechanism that allowed her to find meaning in endlessly serving the interests of others. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about a life where power is inextricably linked to complete loneliness? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about how these houses were arranged from the inside? The mansions of the Gilded Age were designed so that the lives of the servants remained invisible to the owners and their guests. The housekeeper was the main navigator in this labyrinth of hidden corridors, narrow staircases, and secret doors. She knew how to get from the kitchen to the dining room without being seen by the masters, and how to discreetly deliver fresh linen to the bedrooms. The entire architecture of the house worked to separate the worlds, and she was the guardian of this boundary. Her domain was the lower floors or service wings, where a completely different world reigned, distinct from the formal halls. Here it smelled of wax, starch, soap, and cooking, and here real life bustled, ensuring the splendor upstairs. She made sure that the chaos of the work area never seeped into the owner's quarters. The sounds, smells, and sight of working people had to remain behind tightly closed felt-lined doors. Her office was usually located at a strategic point from which she could control all staff movements. It was a small room, furnished modestly but with dignity, where she spent hours poring over accounts and schedules. People came here for instructions, for medicines from the first aid kit she kept, and for permission to go out into the city. It was a command post from which the huge domestic mechanism was managed. One of the main challenges for the housekeeper was the stairs, endless steps that she had to climb dozens of times a day. In houses without elevators and with high ceilings, the journey from the cellar to the attic was a real physical challenge. Despite her age, housekeepers were often women in their 40s or 50s. She had to move quickly and quietly. No one was supposed to see her stopping to catch her breath, her hand pressed to her heart. She knew every floorboard that could creak and every draft that blew through the corridors. She checked that the fireplaces in the living rooms were well lit before the owners came downstairs, and that the flowers in the vases were fresh enough. Her eye was trained to spot the slightest imperfection, a speck of dust on a picture frame, or a crease in the carpet. She lived in constant motion, shuttling between the world of luxury and the world of hard labor, belonging to neither. Her legs ached with fatigue, but her posture remained impeccable, for she was the face of order. How difficult do you think it was to hide physical exhaustion behind a mask of composure? Share your thoughts. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of privilege? It would seem that a housekeeper at the top of the service hierarchy should enjoy company and respect. But the paradox of her position was that the higher she rose, the more silence surrounded her. She dined separately from the rest of the staff, in her own room or at a separate table in the manager's room. It was not just a rule of etiquette, it was a wall separating her from lively human interaction, jokes, and gossip. The younger maids in the servants' quarters could laugh, share news from home, complain about work, and dream about the future. The housekeeper was deprived of this simple human joy, being part of a team, feeling the support of her colleagues. When she entered the room, the laughter stopped, backs straightened, and conversations became formal and dry. She saw life bubbling around her, but she could not touch it, remaining an observer behind the glass of her status. Her meals were served on fine china, and the food was of high quality, often from the master's table. But the taste of even the most exquisite dish fades when there is no one to share it with, when the only companion is the ticking of the clock. She ate in silence, carefully wielding her cutlery, maintaining her manners even when alone, because the mask had become her second face. On the rare occasions when the butler, her male counterpart in the household hierarchy, came in, they might exchange a few words. But even these conversations were mostly about business, wine supplies, upcoming receptions, or staff issues. There was professional respect between them, sometimes even sympathy, but strict rules of propriety prevented a real friendship from developing. In the evenings when her work was done, she would return to her room, where only books or needlework awaited her. She had no family waiting for her at home, because her home was this mansion. The absence of a husband and children was an unspoken and often official requirement for this position. She transferred all her unspent maternal care to maintaining order and comfort for strangers. Sometimes she could afford to have a guest, a niece or an old acquaintance, but this was rare and required approval. Her personal space was permeable to the needs of the house. She could be disturbed at any moment. Even in her moments of rest, she remained on duty, always ready to solve any problem that arose. But no one could say what they cried about into their pillows when the lights went out and the mask of the strict housekeeper came off. If you enjoyed this story, please like it, so we know that topics like this are important to you. What if I showed you a time machine that would take us back to the boudoir of a society lady? The relationship between the housekeeper and the lady of the house was a complex dance of diplomacy, patience, and subordination. The mistress was the source of power, but it was the housekeeper who turned her wishes into reality, often smoothing things over and correcting mistakes. The housekeeper had to be an invisible shadow, guessing her mistress's mood from the sound of her footsteps or the tone of her voice. She was the first person the lady turned to in the morning to discuss the dinner menu or guest list. In this interaction, the housekeeper often acted as a psychologist and confidant, keeping the secrets of the boudoir. She saw her mistress without embellishment, tired, upset, sick, or angry. She knew about family quarrels, financial difficulties, and hidden tears that could not be shown to the world. But this knowledge imposed a seal of silence on her. Not a single word was to leave the walls of the room. Often the mistresses were capricious, demanding, and had no idea how much effort it took to fulfill their whims. The housekeeper had to listen to absurd orders with a respectful bow, and then find a way to carry them out or gently dissuade them. This required tremendous tact and composure, the ability to manage the situation without hurting the owner's pride. There were cases when a strange, restrained affection arose between women based on years of living together. The housekeeper could become the only constant person in the life of a lady whose children had grown up and whose husband was busy with business. But this closeness always had boundaries that could not be crossed. The social gap remained insurmountable. The housekeeper often took the brunt of her mistress's bad mood, becoming a lightning rod for her irritation. She accepted reproaches for cold coffee or a draft as part of her professional duties without taking it personally. Her job was to ensure her mistress's comfort, even if that comfort was built on her own patience and humility. The relationship between these two women was the backbone that held the whole house together. It was a union forged by necessity, tradition, and mutual dependence. In the next chapter, you will learn how she managed an entire army without raising her voice. Managing the staff of servants in a large estate could be compared to commanding a small military unit. Under the housekeeper's command were maids, laundresses, seamstresses, and cooks, each with their own character and responsibilities. The housekeeper had to establish a clear system where every cog turned in the right direction at the right time. She drew up duty rosters, monitored the appearance of the maids, and checked the quality of their work. Her management style was based not on shouting, but on unquestionable authority and a stern gaze. Her mere appearance in the room was enough to silence the chatter and get the work going at double speed. She knew all the tricks of lazy maids and was able to spot flaws that were invisible to the naked eye. Dust on the cornice or poorly cleaned silver could not escape her watchful gaze. Training newcomers also fell on her shoulders. She was a mentor who passed on complex standards of service. She taught young country girls how to make beds properly, set the table, and move silently like ghosts. She molded unpolished simpletons into perfect maids, capable of serving in the best homes in London or New York. This required patience, strictness, and pedagogical talent. The housekeeper was also the judge in the inevitable conflicts and quarrels between the servants. She dealt with complaints, stopped gossip, and punished the guilty, trying to maintain fairness and impartiality. Peace among the servants was the key to tranquility in the master's quarters, and she did everything she could to extinguish the sparks of discord. One of her most difficult duties was to dismiss servants who had committed offenses or become unnecessary. By sending a girl out into the street without references, she was effectively condemning her to poverty or an even more terrible fate. The housekeeper understood this, but her duty to the house and her employers always came first, drowning out any pity she might feel. She also monitored the morality of her female battalion, strictly forbidding flirting with footmen or grooms. The reputation of the house depended on the behavior of the servants, and any scandal would tarnish her professionalism. She was the guardian of virtue, locking the servants' quarters at night and monitoring the correspondence of young maidens. But even the strongest general has his weaknesses and secrets, which we will discuss further. Are you ready for the shocking truth about what was hidden behind the walls of respectable houses? The housekeeper knew more about the family she worked for than their closest relatives or friends. She saw the bills that came to the master and knew about card debts or ruinous spending long before bankruptcy. She found forgotten letters, saw the mistress's tear-stained eyes in the morning, and heard muffled voices behind the closed doors of the study. The house was transparent to her. Its walls could not hide the truth about human weaknesses and vices from her. Her silence was the most valuable commodity she sold along with her labor. The ability to not see what was not meant for her eyes and not hear what was unnecessary was the height of professionalism. She could walk into a room at the most awkward moment and behave as if nothing had happened, preserving the dignity of everyone involved. This hypocrisy was part of the contract, an unwritten rule for survival in the world of the rich. She often became an unwitting accomplice to family dramas, helping to hide the consequences of rash actions, destroying a compromising note, discreetly removing an unwelcome guest, hiding the traces of yesterday's revelry. All this was done by her hands. She protected the facade of the family's respectability, even if behind that facade everything had long since rotted away. Knowing secrets gave her a certain power, but this power was dangerous and toxic. She couldn't use this information without risking losing everything, but possessing it weighed heavily on her conscience. She saw the hypocrisy of a society that preached one set of moral standards but lived by a completely different set. Sometimes she had to cover up the infidelity of spouses, balancing between loyalty to the master and mistress. This required incredible cunning and diplomacy so as not to become an enemy to either side. She was a buffer, softening the blows that family members dealt to each other. But the worst thing was that she had no one to tell about what she had seen, no one to share this burden with. Secrets bursting at the seams inside her, she took them with her to the grave, remaining faithful to the end. In the next chapter, you will learn the price these women paid for their loyalty. For most women of the Victorian era and the Gilded Age, the main goal in life was to get married and start a family. But for a housekeeper, this path was practically closed. Her profession required a vow of celibacy, similar to that of a nun. Estate owners preferred to hire widows or old maids for this position, believing that a family would distract them from their work. A woman with a husband and children could not devote herself entirely to her employer's home. By choosing a career, a young woman was effectively signing away her personal happiness, love, and motherhood. Years passed, she climbed the career ladder, but her heart remained empty, and her dreams of a family of her own faded. She nursed other people's children, loved them, watched them grow up, but knew that she would never hear the word mom addressed to her. Her family became the staff of servants, and her husband became the house itself, which required constant care and attention. She sublimated her need for love through impeccable housekeeping, shiny floors, and the aroma of fresh baking. It was a sacrifice that society took for granted, without thinking about the tragedy of unfulfilled femininity. The rare romances that could happen had to be carefully hidden as they threatened dismissal. Love became a forbidden fruit, a danger capable of destroying everything she had achieved through years of labor. The fear of losing her home and respect was stronger than the desire to be loved. Over the years, she got used to her role as an aunt or mother to everyone around her, suppressing the woman within herself. She wore strict clothes that hid her figure and behaved as if romance was alien and repugnant to her. But who knows with what longing she watched the wedding preparations of her employer's daughters. Loneliness in old age was a programmed part of her destiny, the inevitable end of the path she had chosen. She saw other women growing old, surrounded by grandchildren, and understood that her old age would be different. This realization gave her gaze that special sadness that can be seen in old photographs. In a world where a woman's status was determined by the man next to her, she was an anomaly, an independent but lonely individual. She earned her own money and had savings, but she lacked the warmth that money cannot buy. Her independence had a bitter taste. The story of these women is one of quiet heroism and self-sacrifice for the sake of duty. They were the pillars of society, holding up everyday life, but they themselves remained outside the circle of family warmth. The housekeeper's personal space was a mirror image of her life, austere, functional, and hidden from prying eyes. Usually, her room was located either next to the utility rooms or on the top floor, away from the formal halls. It was her only oasis, where she could take off her mask and be herself. The interior of this room was strikingly different from the luxury of the rest of the house. Simple furniture, minimal decoration, practicality in everything. There was no silk wallpaper or Persian rugs, only the essentials: a bed, a chest of drawers, a table, and a chair. But it was here that she kept her little treasures, photographs of her family, mementos, letters. This room was filled with silence, which was so precious after a noisy day full of orders and bustle. Here she could read a book, pray, or just sit by the window, looking at the park where she was not allowed to walk as a lady. It was her place of solitude, her fortress, and her prison all at once. It smelled of lavender, which she put in her laundry, and the old paper of her account books. The walls of this room absorbed her sighs, her prayers, and perhaps her silent tears. It was the only place in the world she could call her own, albeit temporarily while she served in this house. In this room, she kept her savings, putting aside every spare shilling for a rainy day. She knew her position was precarious, and this money was her only insurance against future poverty. The coin box was a symbol of her hope for a dignified old age. Here she was ill, enduring her ailments on her feet, or lying in bed on the rare days when her strength left her. No one came to sit at her bedside except perhaps one loyal maid. Illness in solitude was one of the most terrible trials, but despite its modesty, this room was filled with the dignity inherent in its mistress. Every item here knew its place, and the cleanliness was impeccable. It was a portrait of her soul, austere, neat, and closed off. This room had witnessed her entire life, from her first days in office to her gray hair. The walls remembered her young and full of energy, and they had also seen her decline. The greatest nightmare of any housekeeper was old age and the loss of her ability to work. In those days, there were no state pensions or social guarantees for servants. She had lived in her employer's house all her life, receiving a salary, food, and shelter. But this contract ended the moment she could no longer work. The horror of the future, of poverty and oblivion, haunted her constantly. Good employers might grant their loyal servant a small pension or allow her to live out her days in a small cottage on the estate, but such cases were the exception, a manifestation of mercy rather than the rule. More often than not, the old housekeeper was simply dismissed and replaced by someone younger and more energetic. The savings she had accumulated throughout her life could depreciate or prove insufficient for a long old age. She was afraid of becoming a burden to distant relatives who had long forgotten her existence. The prospect of ending her days in a workhouse, among beggars and vagrants, made her blood run cold. So she tried to work until the very end, hiding her ailments and failing eyesight. She dyed her graying hair, wore a corset to support her back, and drank strong tea to perk herself up. She fought against time, knowing that she could not win this battle, but there was nowhere to retreat. Each new day was a gift, a reprieve from the inevitable sentence that age would pass on her. She looked anxiously at the young maids, seeing in them her successors, those who would replace her. Jealousy mingled with an understanding of the natural course of things. By retiring, she was losing not only her home, but also her purpose in life, her identity. She was ceasing to be Mrs. Hudson or Mrs. Danvers, a respected figure, and was simply becoming an old woman. The loss of status was a blow to her self-esteem, which she had nurtured for years. Saying goodbye to the house to which she had given the best years of her life was a tragic moment. She walked through the rooms one last time, saying goodbye to the things that were closer to her than people. She left her life here, taking with her only a suitcase with her personal belongings and memories. Her fate was a reminder of the cruelty of a system that squeezed people dry and then discarded them. Behind the facade of nobility lay indifference to those who had created this comfort. The housekeepers left and others took their places, but their invisible labor remained in the foundation of every great house. They left no memoirs behind, and their names are rarely mentioned in historical chronicles. Their stories recorded not in ink on paper, but in starched linen, shining silver, in the impeccable order they created. They were the architects of comfort, the creators of the atmosphere in which their famous masters lived and made history. Without their daily heroism, there would have been no glittering receptions, political dinners, or balls that we read about in textbooks. They provided support, allowing the elite not to think about everyday trifles. Their sacrifice was quiet, devoid of pathos, but no less significant for that. They gave up their own lives to serve others, and they did so with dignity and honor. Their fates reflected all the contradictions of the era: grandeur and powerlessness, beauty and cruelty. We look at old photographs of mansions and admire the interiors, but we rarely think about the women who preserved it all. They are the ghosts of these houses, their souls forever remaining within these walls. Their footsteps can still be heard in the creaking floorboards, and their stern gaze can be seen in the reflection of antique mirrors. Today, a century later, we can only pay tribute to their fortitude and professionalism. They were the first businesswomen, managing the most complex processes, but deprived of recognition. Their lives teach us that behind every grand facade, there is always someone's invisible hard work. Their names may have been erased from memory, but their contribution to the culture of everyday life and history is invaluable. They were the true mistresses of their era, even if they only possessed a set of keys. We have lifted the veil on the lives of those who usually remained in the shadows of luxurious curtains. The story of the housekeepers of the Victorian era and the Gilded Age is a tale of strength of spirit, loneliness, and endless service. It is a reminder that every era has its invisible heroines, whose fates deserve to be remembered and sympathized with. Think about it. Could you sacrifice your personal happiness for such a career and status? What other secrets of everyday life in the past would you like to learn about? Write your suggestions in the comments, and we will be sure to share them in future issues. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories about people who made history in silence.